Top five worst movies of the year for me. I would do more in top five, but honestly, I don't really like adding into the negative YouTube space. If I see a movie and I don't like it, I'm not going to lie to you and do a positive review for it. But at the same time, I just don't want to be like forcing negativity out there. But I do want to talk about my worst movies of the year. Movies that you can fucking avoid because they're terrible. Let's get into it. Number five, a movie that I'm pretty sure everybody forgot even came out this year was 65. Initially, when I saw the trailer for this movie, I thought, okay, like a cool dinosaur movie with Adam Driver, an actor I like. Let's see how this goes. And it was shit. I mean, this movie lied to you about the premise in the trailers, and it just was not a cool movie about some futuristic people going back in time with dinosaurs and running around with them. It was just a shit movie that I don't even understand why it got made in this form, and it just didn't work for me. So yeah, there's that. Number four is the Little Mermaid remake. I hate Disney remakes. This is probably one of the better ones for me, only because I feel like this movie tried to add things to the story that some of it actually did make sense and actually add things to the story. Like the prince actually having a character and, that kind of adding into their romance made me a little bit more engaged in the story and things like that. But it still got terrible acting and performances. It looks ugly as sin. It's not a very well constructed movie, but if you like Disney remakes, you'll like this bullshit. But please stop watching this bullshit. So we can move on. Number three, Insidious: The Red Door. I really did not like this movie like at all. I think that this year has been a terrible year for horror movies, and this is another example of that. I think the Insidious franchise has never really had a bad movie up until this point, but the plot of this movie is just ridiculous. Of just this fucking kid from the original who gets possessed by a demon that we watched in the original happen. Now we're waiting for him to figure out what we saw happen in the first movie happened. Why is this a plot that was made at all? Like, it just makes no sense. It just did not work for me. So, yeah. Number two, speaking of shit horror movies, Five Nights at Freddy's. Some of you might be like raising some shit right now. But here's the thing. I watched this movie on Peacock. I didn't really care to see it in theaters because I knew a bunch of kids would go watch this movie and I just didn't want to deal with it. So I watched it at home. And I thought it was like not great. I talked about my negatives. But the more this film sat with me, the more I've just hated this movie. Every time I see it mentioned, I just groan like, oh, because it's just like, who, who is this? Like, why are we? This is my problem with horror movies nowadays. Babies' first horror movies need to stop happening. In fact, I'm gonna put Megan in the same spot because Megan's has the same problem. They're making baby movies. They're making baby horror movies. And it just bugs me because they're so boring and safe or whatever. When straight up, kids, I have a cousin who loves horror. He's about is he like 10 or 11, something like that? I forget. And he tells me about horror movie characters that he's not even allowed to watch. But you know what? He likes stuff like Coraline and other movies like that. That stuff is way creepier and well made, and it can actually scare a kid. But then you have stuff like this that is just, I can just feel the executives going, make the animatronics not scary, make them kind of scary but not too scary, and it's just so we can sell that plushie. And you're just like, stop. It's just terrible. Megan was a little bit better because I think it actually had some ideas that I didn't really give it credit for in my review for it earlier this year. But at the same time, I was sitting here like, bro, like, why is this film not rated R? I can't remember a single kill in the movie that worked for me. None of it was really well put together. It just sucked. I'm sorry, it just did. Number one, again, really bad year for horror movies. The Exorcist Believer. Yep. I walked out of this movie. I'm not even gonna lie about that. In fact, I'm gonna put Expendables 4 here. I also walked out of these both movies. I didn't miss a whole lot, but I fucking hated these movies. They were just so bad on just every level. Expendables 4, just nothing about it worked. It just felt very mean-spirited and just lazy and just like no one wanted to be here. No one gave a shit. That was the Expendables. Exorcist felt a little bit different. It felt like people actually wanted to be there, except for the actress who played the character from the original Not Return. But it just felt like they were forcing a movie trilogy that just had no business being a trilogy. It was just horrible. I hated it. I just can't. Did not like this movie. Did not like any of these movies. But at the same time, I think all these movies I had something I appreciated about, except Expendables 4 and The Exorcist Believer. I did not have anything I appreciate about those movies. But yeah. These are the movies. Don't know what to tell you. Worst movies I've seen all year. If these are worst movies I've seen all year, it's a pretty good year. I do want to point out a couple honorable mentions. Beau is Afraid. I thought about putting this movie on the worst of the year list, but it's on my best of the year list. And I think I said in that video that I could kind of put it either or. And I was thinking of actually putting it on this list, but I decided just since it's on one list, ignore it. And I think it would just be confusing to my audience to put it on both best and worst lists. But what can you do? And I want to also mention, what was I going to say? Let me add another one to the list. What was the other one? I was going to talk about another movie on the list. Oh, Ruby Gillman. I was trying to think of what the worst animated movie I saw this year. I think Ruby Gillman is probably it. Because if there's something worse, I can't remember it. And that's probably a sign that it was above Ruby Gillman. I don't think Ruby Gillman was terrible, but I think the movie was so predictable and safe that it just didn't work for me. It's a movie I could still have fun and watch, but it's not a movie that sticks with me that well. So, and I also want to put Wish here, because honestly, guys, I liked Wish, but the more it's sitting with me, the less I like it, especially the music. I think the music is the biggest problem for me. I think the rest of the movie works just fine, but the actual music itself just does not work. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Like, share, and subscribe.